Hello, hello.
What's up, Matt? How you doing?
Man, it is any day that your contractor says you're almost done with
Oh, that's
construction. It's
great,
like
man.
the best day of your life.
Oh, I'm glad
Like,
to hear that because I'm still in
you're-
my scrubs and I've been home for several hours, so
oh
it
yeah,
hasn't been.
yeah. I am telling you, I am looking forward to basically having a creation space for this show, for just work in general. Like it's going to be nice to have like a space, and we're going to get to like things like that
That's awesome. That's
tonight.
awesome.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, so that part is good. And I actually, it's funny, I'm going to sound like a dick now. I'm like, oh, like I've got this new thing and I was on vacation and blah blah blah. But I happened to have two trips that were right next to each other that were unrelated, and the second one was complete accident and was like plane vouchers and all this other stuff that was like free basically. So not taking the trip would have
Would
been
have been a waste.
kind of
Yeah.
stupid. So I went to Iceland for kids' spring break.
Yeah.
And man, I connected with humankind over there in a way I had forgotten about in a while. Those people are fucking savages. It's amazing. Like those guys, like Icelanders are fucking solid as rocks. Like that place is awesome. You know what I mean? Like they are amazing. The country is amazing. It's like dropping yourself onto like an alien landscape.
Yeah.
But like my kids were on their phone like hardly ever. Like
That's
during
great.
the
That's
whole trip.
amazing. How often does that happen?
Never. Like
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Like, but there was no internet. And here's the funny story. I haven't told them this yet. One day when they're adults, I'm going to tell them this. But our car had a Wi-Fi hotspot that was on the entire week because we used it for the car. And not one time did we told the kids, no, you're fucked. There's no internet. You're in Iceland in the middle of nowhere. And they were like, we're done.
They bought it.
Like,
Yeah.
they bought it hook, line, and fucking iceberg, But like we come back and then we've got a week and a half later, I have these ski passes that basically had 5 days left on them that I wasn't going to use.
Yeah.
And I had Southwest vouchers that were expiring. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go visit my parents. We're going to take the kids skiing on the West Coast for the first time ever. So we go to Heavenly. And between those two trips, it really got me thinking like, this sounds horrible to say, but like, I really think am forgetting how to be a human and not be a professional.
I
Like,
feel
you know what I mean?
man. I feel you. I almost feel like since we got out of COVID, there's been this grind that's been more intense than it ever has. And like honestly, I got on my lock screen on my phone is the last vacation I've taken. Speaking of how like you got two back to back, I believe my daughter was like 4 in that one.
Man.
She's almost 10. You
got to fix that shit in a minute.
We do, and we're planning a couple of things, and perhaps that's why I've been in the doghouse so much lately.
That's probably
it's one of those things when you're going fast, you don't want to take your foot off the accelerator, and that's probably the time when you need to back off.
You know what though? I mean, as an entrepreneur, you as well, I think you could appreciate every entrepreneur I've ever talked to in my entire life, they all say the same thing. They're like, well, I remember very clearly what it was like to have no clients, no money, eating ramen noodles and living in a studio apartment somewhere. And you're like, listen, some parts of my life back then were super fun, but tastes have changed. Like
I'm good. I don't need to go back there.
I don't need to go back there, So it's like you kind of like operate from this almost like a fear mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh my God, if I take my foot off this pedal, I'm only 5 minutes away from being back in the studio. And you're like, that's stupid, like across the board. But I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. Like it's like you almost don't know another way to think.
Yeah, you're kind of stuck in the framework that you built for yourself.
Right. And so like when it came to the two vacations back to back, and the second one was just skiing for the weekend. So I wouldn't say that was a vacation per se, but it was a
change
trip.
Of scenery.
It's a change of scenery. It was like, right. And so, I just think it's like one of those things where you need to be reminded that there's other things on the planet than your professional aspirations, right? And even your parental aspirations, right? Like I'm fully committed to taking my kids to lacrosse and soccer and ski meets and all that sort of stuff. But that's not really like connecting with them. It's really more just like assisting them in that endeavor. It's more utilitarian. It's not really human. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're it's like, all right, it's Tuesday. We've got to get to practice at 6:30 and, blah, blah, blah. And it's Wednesday. We got to get to lacrosse and it's at this time, it's very
clinical. Believe me, we're in it. It's so regimented. It's so like if you don't pre-plan that, you're gonna mess it up.
Sure. And I think that like it's funny because I think and this might be actually a good off ramp to what we're going to talk about tonight, but it was occurring to me like at 46, I'm at a spot where I'm like young enough to still want to kind of really lean in professionally and kind of like get the career continuing.
There's still the hunger and the fire.
Exactly. Like I'm still very motivated, but I'm also like long enough in the parental tooth that I don't want to necessarily miss out on what is left
of childhood for your
of
kids.
my time with them. Right.
Yeah, like, I got you.
And so there's this like weird duality there that like is getting more intense by the year kind of thing, right? Like as I see my son, who's the older one, get closer to that off ramp,
that threshold. Yeah.
I start getting more and more anxious. And I think it's
killer. It's killer because, like even now, wow, driving a car is only a couple years away.
Well, I got a 14-year-old, so I'm 4 years ahead of you.
Yeah.
Like,
well, not even, no, I got a 13-year-old. So
shit. I'm sorry. Really, I forgot. Yeah.
No. Sometimes I forget one of them too.
We were talking about, we were talking about your younger one earlier. So I had her on the brain.
And it's just, it's one of these crazy things where I caught up with my old Tai Chi teacher and I said, wait, last I talked to you, your son was like 12 or something. And he goes, yeah, he's finishing up his first year at Georgetown. I went, oh crap. That's how that happens.
Yeah.
That's how that happens. What happened? I don't know. I blinked, I turned my head, and the next thing I know, a decade's gone.
So here's like the crux of the question that kind of started our conversation for tonight, right? Like couple sort of like setup points here, right? One, you and I in particular are at a point where professionally we learned from a generation that wasn't widely considered as healthy, like our parents, like work ethic and like the way work was done. That was like the gold watch era and like, stuff like that.
You're going to kill yourself for the company. You're going to put those best years in. Yeah.
And like, so that was our role model, right? Now we got to live through a sort of spiritual renaissance, if you will, like yoga became a thing and meditation became a thing.
And the idea, the focus on long-term health was starting to emerge. I won't say it was front and foremost.
So I'm gonna challenge you on this one.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this? It wasn't long-term health. It was fad health for now.
I would say, but that, like, you're mentioning yoga, you're mentioning Tai Chi. I mean, that's kind of where, like, I started tasting that in college. I started seeing that come around. And I also feel like, because, and this is kind of a weird one. I saw somebody on TikTok post a video that every Gen Xer stitched, where it's like, how come nobody's coming for the Gen Xers? They're only going for the boomers and the posts were like, hey man, the Gen Xers absorbed most of the trauma from the previous generations, and we were fucking shielding you from that.
Sure. Yeah. Like we were the chasm.
We were the ones that were like, I don't want that for my kids.
Nope. Yeah.
We were also the ones, and we've talked about it before, like now our kids are hanging out and there's like, somebody that's gay is in their close friend group and no one's even mentioning it. right?
And no one's even. I told you the story about
we talked about it online on
trying to like describe the black kid in his class, and it took him like 20 minutes because the only thing he didn't say about this kid is that he was black.
Yeah,
I was like,
and it's
there's
like
one black kid in your class.
That's not derogatory. You're okay there, like that's.
Well, no, but that's what I'm saying. I'm like the one most obvious. He was the only black kid in the class, like so, like by way of like just simple description, like it would have been the easiest way to say this is exactly who I'm talking about. Now maybe you don't start with that.
Yeah, but like
after the fourth, fifth, sixth try, the tall kid, the kid with the black hair, like you start going through and you're like, no, dude, I have no idea who you're fucking talking about. The black kid. Oh, I got it. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
you could have saved us 5 minutes.
Yeah, right.
But,
exactly.
but on one hand, I applaud that, right? They're
and we're also the generation that doesn't view that as a fucking racist comment, right? Like,
no,
because we're like, no, it's just description.
We've been so bruised from previous stuff that we're like, no, you kids are doing it right. We gotcha.
No, that's exactly right. I think,
and at the same time, we're like, can you just get to the fucking point?
You know what though? What I will say about them is that I think you're right. They are absolutely doing it right with one asterisk.
Yeah.
They exemplify the typical human rubber band effect where we say, okay, this is bad.
We've overshot the other way.
So this is like how we fix it. And like the reality is like they're absolutely fucking right. Like you should have your friend circle should look like a United Colors of Benetton.
Oh my
billboard.
God! You just made the reference I use all the time.
Yeah, like it should.
No one's our age. No one's our age. They don't get that.
And that should be totally fine. Half of them should be gay. A couple of them might be a transvestite. I don't care. Like that's all fine.
It doesn't matter.
So you're doing it. Yeah, you're doing it the right way. But here's the thing: don't get pissed off when like and I did this interview with a guy who we both know, but about like why should I care about your identity? It was for the book, the Metacognition book.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating because he is in a human capital dependent business. And the question was apropos because he's like, look I don't care about your pronoun because I shouldn't have to. My job is to make you employable, which means I'm going to do the thing that you need to be good at in order to be employable. So what does not influence that capacity to do work is who you're putting your penis into, what religion, what God you pray to, what, who you go to bed with at night. Like none of this is relevant. And so like, why do I have to care? And I thought it was an interesting
It's interesting. And I understand what they're saying about that, but now we're starting to see, and this is funny because I was on this business panel and one of the questions was, hey, 78% of the people in this study are saying as business owners are finding it hard to find employees and retain employees and this and that. I'm sitting there going, well, I'm part of the 22%. And they go, why? And I'm like, I don't know. I think I got office culture down, like I want people to feel comfortable at work. I want people to be who they are. And that just makes sense to me. You treat them like human beings, it's like,
but see, that's his point was that. Yeah, right. But his point was that, right? Like if he goes, I start and stop at treating people like human beings, essentially, and so like, I don't need to further be shamed.
I get what you're saying there. I think we're saying the same things. Mine is I'm going to include that because that's who they are. And he's like, that doesn't make them better or worse in my eyes.
No, I guess what I was saying was that like, not that they were better or worse, but like, I guess when he asked that question, it was in response to a sort of an overreaction to the omission of, right? So in other words, if you did not include, like if you called them by the wrong pronoun, let's just use this same example, right?
Yeah.
The crowd that gets huffy about that, like his question was more directed towards that demographic, saying like, look, I'm happy to call you fucking kangaroo if you want me to call you kangaroo.
But if I fuck up, please don't get,
don't get up in my face about this. And please, for the love of God, don't try to shame me into feeling bad about not calling you this.
Especially if you haven't had an interaction with that person before.
Correct. Like if I've met
you terminology.
Right. If I've met you 30 times and you've asked me to call you her for 30 times, the 31st time you have every right to punch me in the
Well,
face.
I would say much sooner than that, but
I mean,
and what's the intention behind it too? Am I just so used to doing a thing, and it's funny because
at a certain point it's just belligerence, right? You're like,
now,
all right,
now you're being an asshole.
Yeah, now you're just being a dick. So,
it's funny because we talked about this on air. I just finished the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program where they bring in business owners, and they were singing my cohort's praises. They're like, "You guys are so great. You're so great. You're so great. You're so great." And I'm like, "You guys, that's got to be a canned response. They got to say that to everybody." And then I found out one of my other cohort members, a couple of them had went out with one of the business advisors, and they go, "Yeah, not the last cohort." And I was like, what do you mean? They're going like, "No, clearly you guys have been like somehow the mix just came together. We all gelled right away, all that stuff."
Just sort of.
But we had a lot more younger business owners, and we're like, "Well, why is that bad?" And they were like, everything was like had to become a social justice issue. To the point where
that's the overreaction, right? Like,
right. We've gone too far to the point where somebody came in to talk about, company image and, values and mission statement, and how you kind of package that to the public. And they read somebody's mission statement, and it said something about like, we're like, we really want our employees to feel like family, which is canned bullshit. But it was like basically they were talking about that. And somebody during the class literally stood up and said, "I find that word offensive." And the instructor was like, what word? Here's somebody that's like not intentionally going out of her way to say something. She's reading the fucking company's mission statement. And she goes, "Family." And I'm like, okay, yeah, that one's like, oh yeah,
you lost me at
some of us came from a bad family. And I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't make it not a word. And that doesn't, and that also doesn't make it everyone's experience. So I understand you want to be sensitive to that. Maybe you don't use it in yours. But
that's the point. You also use that case.
Yeah.
You also have to recognize that culturally, more people than not are not going to have a problem with this word.
Have a negative reaction to that word.
And like your microaggression towards this situation is not a universal sentiment.
Well, and at that point, that's not a micro, like the microaggression would be I say something not necessarily intending it to have impact. The reaction is almost more of more than the actual.
I see what you're saying. I guess
is exponentially bigger than the situation calls for.
And I think by microaggression, what I mean was it wasn't like they stood up and tried to punch somebody, right? Like
it was definitely the wrong way to comment on this.
Like I need to comment on this, right? Like exactly, so if they stood up and like you stormed the stage and like fucking tried to rip their hair off, that's
an aggression.
That's an actual aggression. So yeah, maybe microaggression.
No, I get what
you're
saying.
right. No, you're right. That's the wrong way of saying it though. But like, I guess.
No, I understand the point there.
Yeah,
right?
It would be like a sort of.
And they gave this speaker who's always had stellar reviews. That one person ripped her a new one. And they said it wasn't just that class. It was every class. Something would come up like that. So there's a point to be sensitive. There's a point to be caring and inclusive and equitable. Equitable.
SAT.
I'm adding extra.
SAT
to that. But within that, there's a kind of like how much is too much that way too. I don't know what that is. Everybody be who they want to be so long as they're not hurting somebody kind of thing.
Yeah, well, we'll find our way on that, but I mean,
I think we will.
I think we will, but like, I mean, it's so basically as this whole thing kind of unfolds on a global stage, what's kind of funny about it is like you've got these tribes out there around like these like health tenets, right? Just to kind of go back to what we were talking about originally, and like. I guess if you look, I gave a guy a ride home once who's like, oh, I'm on, we were coming back from a comedy club. It was late at night. I was a designated driver, so I wasn't, I was totally fine.
Yeah.
And they were not. So they were, and so we're going home. It's super late. They're like, can we stop at McDonald's? Like whatever we see. Actually, they didn't say that. Can we stop wherever we see first? And the first thing we saw was McDonald's. And we're all healthy people in the car and like kind of like not health nuts, but like definitely more like, we're not eating McDonald's.
That's not a common
right
stop for you. Yeah.
No. And so like we pull out, we get in there, and like we get in there and we come back, and I stayed in the car because I actually wasn't hungry, and I honestly, even if I was fucking starving, McDonald's is a tall order.
Not necessarily the thing that's going to do it for you.
No, they ain't going to do it, right? So they come back in, and it was a husband and wife, and they come back in with like 10 cheeseburgers.
Jeez.
Like, it's like crazy. Like I'm like, wow, you got kids at home or something you got to feed? And he is a carnivore. That's it. So he peeled off.
He's going to eat the burger.
He peeled off all the buns. He did, he eats. I think he can eat fries. I don't think it's at the exclusion of other things, but his primary input, his primary caloric, input is carnivores.
But even that, you're telling me that, and then he's going to eat a shitload of fries, and that's going to. This is the thing, right? We're extreme even in our health doctrines, right? There's no middle path, No,
and that's kind of where I'm going. It's like, do we count that? And I think we do. Do we count that as the new definition of medicine, right? Like, because like the reality is, I've already fired all of my primary care physicians over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And I have this concierge-like doctor.
Yeah.
And I don't have this conversation anymore. Like, I'm just like, here's what I want to do. And I need you to tell me what the bad parts of that are. And then tell me what the good parts are. And let's caucus about the answer, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how that works.
Go ahead.
But that incorporates a lot of things, right? Like it incorporates my, yoga practices when I had them. Like I'm just rebooting yoga, by the way.
Yeah.
We're early on in the reboot process.
I got
But like yoga informs it. My martial arts training informs it. My dietary sort of proclivities inform it. My biohacker proclivities inform it. My doctor informs it. My family informs it. Like my family history informs it. Like all these input variables, right? And one thing I realized as a free functioning adult in 2023 is that like systemically, we don't have the knowledge to support proactive health in the United States or anywhere in the world that I'm aware of right now.
Anywhere in the modern world, I would say. Right. It's somehow we lost the way, right? I mentioned this. Right. I was on a TV show that'll air sometime in a couple months from now, where I mentioned this one guy that had this whole branding thing around rewilding. What was it like when we were outside?
Who was that? What's that guy's name?
I don't know, but he's like,
I remember that.
And I don't know what happened to him because I think I still follow him. But it was and when I looked at what I do in my clinic, it's like, look, if you were outside, you get hot and cold, and that knocks out two of the services. If you were by the water, by salt water, you get salt therapy, that knocks out that service. You know, and it's like, maybe I shouldn't be saying that stuff because it's bad for business. But you know what I'm saying?
That means they're going to have to take a 3-hour hike by a fucking saltwater body. I mean, nobody's going to do that. You're in business because we don't have access to that shit.
And we don't have a lifestyle that supports that, right? And what I think we're talking
or a knowledge
about
base that informs it. Like we don't even
that's
have
the crazy thing. I mean, that used to be intuitive.
Right. Now we have to be told. Yeah. You're right.
So what do we do? You mentioned it before when you said when we were coming up, there was pretty much fad medicine, right?
Yeah, totally.
And the great thing now is we're quoting studies and things like that, and then the way studies are moving, like 6 months later, we're like, no, that was wrong.
But see, that's the thing, and like, people can flame me all they want on this, but that was the thing that pissed me off about the people who were up Fauci's ass during COVID. I'm like, look,
He was pivoting based on new information.
I'm not here to comment on fucking Fauci's private life or, whatever. I couldn't care less what the guy does when he's not at work.
Yeah.
So like all these people that are trying to attack his character and this and that, I'm like, look, I don't care about anything. What I care about is that this guy's job was to give us the blink on what the fuck we were dealing with when we were dealing with it. And this guy's information inputs changed half hour to half hour, probably from March of 2020 up until like probably the end of 22.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like this, and in intensity, it would have been the remainder of 2020 and probably the first 3/4 of 21 when this whole thing was sort of like really going and finding a level. But like people who like, and I get like, I don't get super crazy in a lot of conversations, but this is one where I get a little bit kind of out of control because people who take that position make me want to like just lose my mind because I'm like, dude, look, this is the way shit works. People who are truly looking to acquire new knowledge, net new knowledge, are probably wrong 23 times a minute compared to
and as they're adding information and as they're allowing that opinion to change and alter and if they're wrong, they're wrong.
Yeah,
like,
it's funny because they say like, and I learned this later in life. I wish I would have known this earlier, but Michael Jordan had like one of the most abysmal shot percentages, despite being Michael Jordan.
Like,
yeah, right. Like, but the reality is he just took that many shots. Like it was like percentage wise, I missed a lot, but I made it so many times. And like, that's kind of like the way I look at some of this stuff. It's like, there's only a faction of people that are actually looking to sort of just peel this back.
Yeah.
Right. And this could be anything. In this case, it was Fauci, right? Like he was tasked with peeling back COVID. Right. And so first of all, no one ever heard of COVID. It's a fucking brand new. Second of all, like we're looking at new ways to make vaccines, which by the way, fucking whatever you feel about COVID vaccine, that whole mRNA situation.
It's crazy. It could be a game changer for so many diseases.
Yeah, right. It's like, so like you kind of like, all right, well, here, and this is my default posture and my sort of first retort to any of these idiots when they talk about like stuff like this. I said, so, what you're telling me is worst case scenario, you were inconvenienced and had to go down to CVS and get a shot, right? That's like the worst case scenario.
I mean, there were some people that had reactions, but by and large,
it was
anytime we do public health, you're going to have outliers, and
that was
you're playing with the largest population,
right? And it was the really adverse reaction was a silly small percentage of the overall group,
and certainly the disease was drastically more dangerous.
Yeah, and so like whatever you feel about it, like the journey that process took us on yielded some results that were beyond COVID impressive, right? Like, but like here's the thing, like making that kind of advancement, which was not insignificant, and I think it's funny we lost in the United States anyway. And I don't have a frame of reference, but in the United States we lost
1 million people.
We lost 1 million people, but we also lost the appreciation for the delta between the day before COVID and like halfway through COVID.
Yeah.
Like evolutionarily speaking, we made a huge jump. We made a huge jump in understanding. We made a huge jump in what group think looks like. Like we had scientists from every nation on the planet that owned a computer and a microscope doing the same exact thing. Like we had corporations that knew whoever came up with a vaccine first would make trillions of dollars. Like we had a very sophisticated thought network deployed to solve COVID, and that has never happened ever
Not globally. Definitely not globally.
Well, it did the last time, 1918, but like that, there was no technology.
There was no technology. There was no, you just were, that was.
You barely had phones back then, for Christ's sake. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And I think that's kind of like, we tend to run this theme on technology and AI and all these things. And we're at such a weird place in the world. Right. And I'm sure at any time somebody could say that. They're like, hey, you've seen this new printing press, but really the speed at which information is going is faster than we can keep up with now. Clearly.
Yeah. But see, that's where that for me is the single most elucidating part of the equation.
Absolutely.
Because when things get that hectic, the successful, follow me on my little esoteric soapbox here for a second.
Okay, all right.
The really smart, super smart people, when things get that broad, shift from a get things done specifically, and then we can get things done exponentially, because we don't have to worry about any of this other stuff. All we're trying to do is fix this thing.
Yeah.
And because the world is out here, we can now pull in data from just an infinite number of sources, but we're only trying to talk about this little tiny, like, Brazilian strip of knowledge in the scheme of things, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the one real positive that's come out of this revolution, is that if you want to talk about migratory bee excrement and its impact to the local biome, yeah, you can deep dive on that.
Yeah, and the information is there, and if not, you can find a way to figure that out.
And you can extrapolate data. Like, you got a PhD, you know what data crunching looks like. It's fucking excruciating. Like,
for the record, it's not a PhD. It's a clinical doctorate. It's not.
Oh,
we had to do research, but we did not have to do that level.
Okay, well, I know a bunch of PhDs, and one of the like clinical PhDs, and all of them basically said the same thing. They're like, a PhD is nothing more than like learning, like in an official ninja-like way, how to do research. Like, it's not
on one very narrow specific topic.
Yeah, but that part is by design so that you learn how to do research.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Because the more narrowly focused, the more difficult research is going to be, because the more niche the data is. And so the more niche the contributors to that data set are. And so you almost have to be, A, you have to be passionate about it, and B, you got to know how to ask the right fucking questions.
Well, and that's what always, like, that's always the thing I find so comedic when somebody says, I've done my own research.
Yeah, right. Like, that's not a thing. That's a learned skill.
Like, I'm going to shit on podcasts now that, you and I have one. But
making a podcast.
Listening to a podcast is not doing research.
No, but you know what I think podcasts are? I think they are the Chat GPT of research, right? They're like
I wouldn't say they're that accurate.
No, hold on. No. They're good blank page tools, right? If you want to kind of have like a good kind of like, I can't think of a good idea for a podcast. You could just go to Apple's top 100, Spotify's top 100, and you could just be like, look, these are the top 100 podcasts in the world.
And here's what, is trending. Yeah.
And I could learn how to trend it, and like, I could put in the work, but like, the reality is nobody wants to fucking put in the work. Nobody. Yeah. Nobody ever. Like, and so podcasts are good. But here's the thing. I used to think podcasts were stupid too. We all did. Let's be honest.
Well,
like,
look, dude,
there was a point in your life where you're like, podcasts are fucking stupid.
We're hosting one, and we listen to them. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that should not be the end all be all.
No, I know. But what I'm saying is, one point you did, and for good reason.
Probably. I'm like, who listens to this crap?
Well, and it's for good reason, right? Because of that point, you and I both know before podcasts that research means this thing. Yeah. And we all know now the podcasts are this other thing, right? Like, it's all the way over here. It looks nothing like it, but it might have some things that smell in common, but like, it's not really the same thing. But what it is like a redefinition of what research is going to be, because honestly, I will use ChatGPT over Google probably 8 out of 10 times now, because that natural language processing of an AI is basically
better.
what we want to do with Google, and it won't fucking do.
Well, it aggregates the information as well, I think is what it does so beautifully, right? It puts it into a palatable form based on what the entire database it's looking at is saying.
No, I know, but remember back in the Ask Jeeves day, if you wanted to do like you wanted to know where bugs inhabited, right? You'd have to type in like bugs, and then in all caps you'd have to say and like right, and you'd have to put the operator in the phrase, and that was a hack really, because the input form recognized it as code, and the code for put it together or created as two separate strings that include both of each other was and. That was the operator in computer program. So it was a hack because you were essentially doing what a programmer would have done. And that kind of evolved into this natural language model. But like, that's my point. Like when I want to learn something, like, I don't know, like finishing the construction project, I want to know how to hang like a barn door style gate, right? Like, cause I wanted to slide behind a fence.
Yeah.
I went on to ChatGPT and I was like, I've got a piece of leftover fence and I want to create a roller fence on it. How do I do it?
How do I do that? Yeah.
And it came up with like links on where to go. It came up with a prescription. It like, now, if I didn't already have an idea what I wanted to do before that, and this was just sort of me playing with ChatGPT, I could have sat there for another 20 minutes and just like further sculpted that. But like the ideas were solid. You know what I mean? So like it's like almost like I don't have to think anymore because I could just talk to this omnipresent, being that knows everything I need it to know and just let it do searching for me. Because at the end of the day, when you're looking for shit on the internet, that's kind of what you want. You want to be like, Google, think for me. I need to know.
Yeah, just solve the problem.
Right. Like if I want to know how many different gauge needles there are in acupuncture, right? Like I could call you because you would know the answer to this question, or at least
I know the answer?
I don't know, but you would probably know more than I would.
We go from 46 to 26, I think so. Every two.
But what I'm saying is like, if I had to put money on a horse in this race, it would be you over me. Let me just tell you.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. You know what I mean? But here's the thing. If there was a third horse in this race, I'd bet on the AI over you because
I know,
like,
and you're going to get it quicker than me because I'm
gonna
have to go like 2, 4, 6. Yeah,
Right. I'm going to get it quicker, and it's going to know what acupuncture needles in, Uruguay look like. They're going to add that into the fucking.
I think
mix.
They're pretty universal.
Well, whatever you get what I'm saying.
I know.
Stupid point. Yeah. No, yeah, I get it. It's an obvious hole I walked into there, but I mean, at the same time, I'm like whatever the answer is in that ecosystem, it's going to have every input variable. Like, it's not going to be like, you don't have like a partial story. And like you and I, we have partial stories. We might have really,
you don't know anything that outside of your frame of reference, So if, like even you're bringing up acupuncture needles, but on a bigger thing, look, acupuncture's been around for 2,700 years. There isn't one person on this planet that knows everything that's ever been written or done about it.
No, of course
not. And AI probably won't because we've lost some text and things like that. But anything that's fed into a computer at some point will be.
Well, and that's the funny thing. My neighbor here sells the Da Vinci, that like surgical thing that like yeah, right. And want to talk about like a thought tangent that gets a little freaky, but in a really good way, in a really, benevolent way, is that what if every Da Vinci, and there's probably 10,000 surgeries a day or more that go on that one of those machines, right? What if every one of those machines was overlaid with an AI that was just monitoring all of them every second of every surgery, every day, all day, and incorporating all of that knowledge into a central database? I'll be honest with you. And this is just a guess. It's less than a year before has evolved surgery beyond all recognizable forms of humankind.
I think we probably already talked about it, right? They already have machines like that closing surgeries and closing wounds on their own. And all they did was like, here's every recorded closing of a wound or a surgical incision that we have on video. And they fed it to the AI that powers that machine, and that thing can do that nonstop. So why doesn't, once you have those data points, once you have a way to feed that to the machine, it becomes the best surgeon in the world. You know,
well, that's what I'm saying. Then you're like, oh, my doctor graduated at Hopkins. You're like, yeah, my doctor just performed 3 million surgeries this year.
And learned with everyone how to get better.
I don't care what school your doctor went to. He didn't perform 3 million surgeries this year.
Yeah, and your doctor also, and I say this all the time, your doctor may have an off day. Your doctor may slip. Your doctor may have gotten into a fight with his wife before he came into the surgical ward.
You know, don't
you don't know.
Don't get laid for 2 weeks. Yeah, I'll bet you if you laid how long it had been since doctors got laid and the propensity for errors in open heart surgery,
but
there might be a correlation.
What do you want a person that's going to tire? Like if you're having some crazy long surgery, right? You know, I've seen photos of God, I forgot what country it was in, but they were doing this heart transplant. It took 20 hours. And like literally they had teams of doctors coming in, and like two of the doctors, so they didn't contaminate themselves, were literally just leaning against the wall trying to catch some shut eye.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, oh, as long as that thing's got hooked up to electricity, we're good.
Right.
It's not tired.
No, yeah, no, it just keeps going. And like, so like when we get, you know, I think that like we've talked a lot about, and I'm talking with people all the time about, everybody's like going doom and gloom on the AI thing. And I said, you know what everybody fears that I've seen when I peel it back? They fear it is a fundamental disruption to every institution we understand currently.
Well, I think they get that. I also think
it's terrifying when they get it. I think people get it. You're right. But they freak out.
Yeah, they freak out. They immediately go to some kind of Terminator scenario.
Yeah, right. Skynet, it's coming.
Yeah, like, you know, and it very well may be, but like, you know, and I think this is where the forward-thinking people tend to live, is like, well, is it really all that bad?
No,
you know,
it's not bad at all.
Can I take it's neutral. It could go bad. Or it could solve every fucking problem we've ever had.
Yeah, and but it's also like, you know, when it comes to like our health, right? Like I can sort of tribe up with people that do what I do and like follow a protocol, you know, like the Ozempic, what is that word, by the way, that I can't remember, where it's like the molecularly identical, but it's called something like they wouldn't call it, that website you and I talked about. Yeah, no, not the generic.
Oh, so they're using, what are you saying? So Ozempic is the brand name.
Yeah.
But like semaglutide is the peptide itself.
Peptide, that's the word I couldn't remember. All right. I was like, yeah, so like the peptide, like that sort of thing is like something we know, right? Like we know that this is a peptide, we know at this dosage, we know this and that and the other. I don't see why, like, within the next 10 years, we don't have like basically a machine at your house where you put your hand on it, put your arm up to it, whatever the thing is. But it basically either or creates a capsule that you eat, but like it either synthesizes a concoction and injects it, or synthesizes the concoction and capsulizes it. And that is your daily medicine, right? Because like, there's no two humans on Earth that would actually have the same concoction, right? Like because
and dosage and everything.
Yeah,
you know?
Right.
I would say if we're looking, I would have to broaden that. Like, look, this medicine works because we understand how this thing happens physiologically, right?
But so if that's going to be pretty congruent. AI is going to understand all of that.
All of that. And you know, they're using it to make new psychedelics. They're using it to make new drugs. They're using it to predict outcomes of medical applications, you know, as far as inventing new procedures. So I could see at some point, like, the technology becomes so accessible. We it probably won't be a household item in the next 10 years, but at some point that might very well be a thing that exists. But
Sure.
it would have to have a little mini chem lab in there, you know?
Yeah, and that's the thing though, like think about it this way, like, we design drugs right now, like, I don't know, pick an antidepressant, like pick a mood altering drug of any kind, right? These are like spray and pray methods in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
Like they're like, okay, we have a drug that does this huge swath that's a mile wide, right? And it does this thing. But like the reality is it's probably more, you'd benefit more from a ninja approach where you kind of came in and just did like one little tiny thing.
Well, and I think we're definitely arcing in that direction, right? We're trying to get
that's where this ends up is what my point
was. Oh,
right?
absolutely. Like, and as we get, like, because on the other end, right, we do this blood work and then we have to do all these complex things. What if we could feed that to AI?
Exactly.
Does that take a 2-week lab test to come back in a couple of minutes?
Yeah,
can an AI scan a blood sample quicker than somebody that has to sit there and culture something? And I feel like we are going to head that way sooner than not.
Well, it kind of doesn't make sense not to, right? Like the fact that they can do the genome sequencer in the size of a candy bar on a desk now, like like that kind of tells me like, okay, well, why couldn't I just wake up and put my finger on it? It takes a prick of my blood and it's like my vitamins for the day come out. Because reality is like none of this stuff is really all that is. I mean, what you and I are talking about right now, like probably could be done with like a well-funded first-year engineering student. Like,
because it's already so pervasive, right?
It's all out there. Like this isn't even rocket science. Like literally, like
it's funny when I started talking about Chat GPT to like, now you have like everyone's using it. Everyone's using it, and if people aren't, they're like, "What the hell is that?" And you're like, "Oh, you talk to it like another person."
Yeah, but not everybody's using it. That's the thing. You think everybody's using it. I do too. Because
everybody that I'm running with is using it. Yeah.
But here's the thing: when you go out of that circle, and I told you I had these 2 trips back to back. Guess who's not talking about that shit? Anybody else?
I gotcha. But like, honestly, business owners who are looking for a competitive edge, I think they're probably a little bit more like, okay, what's coming down the pipe with this?
Well, sure. You hang out with people that run businesses who have a vested interest. Yeah. But
and certainly the arena for health applications is so huge that we're probably going to have to talk about that again.
No, and I think like the thing that I kind of want to keep an eye on, which was the point of tonight, was really like saying like, our definition of health is different today than it was yesterday. It's going to be different tomorrow than it is today. And like, just like Fauci with his, 1,000 wrong things about what to do about COVID, it's like, we're in the most iterative portion of history that's probably ever existed. Like we are in like, okay, I can guarantee this works for the next 28 seconds.
And it's absolutely going to rewrite itself.
Like, yeah, right. Like I'm only guaranteeing it moment to moment. Right. And so like, I don't know, it's kind of interesting because people talk about Skynet and everything, but like, I'm like, or I think of a day where maybe you just walk downstairs and you got a little cold coming on. So when you prick your finger, it's like you need a little bit more zinc, you need a little bit more vitamin C.
We're going to bump this up into you.
Yeah. We're just going to give you a little boost. And like your vitamin that day kind of recalibrates. Maybe iron is like kind of deprioritized and you just pump the shit out of potassium. And, or you add a little glutathione in on a day, you need a little glutathione. It's just like, I don't know, that's kind of makes me feel better about the world because I'm like, yeah, there's going to be a couple of dickheads that are doing dumb shit, but for the most part.
But I mean, that's everything, you can't escape human nature, unfortunately.
All right, so what are you getting into here, brother?
So, man, I got so much stuff going on. By the time this airs, the story on Cold Plunge will probably have already long since aired. But CBS is coming to film next week. Hopefully, it ends up on national news about cold plunge, and they're using me as an expert. And you're using my clinic as the studio.
Stepped in a pile of shit with this cold plunge thing.
Man,
I love it. It's fucking fantastic.
The person we know that's a futurist did call my office the future of medicine, and I'm like, no, man, I've just been standing here looking that way for a while, And it's like, yeah, that's what futurists do. And I was like, oh. Can I add that to my CV?
That's hilarious.
So what are you up to, man?
So funny that you should mention that, because I have really good friends that are contemporaries of our futurist friend.
Yeah.
And know him well. And I had a call with one of them today. Funny enough.
Awesome.
Yeah. They're getting interviewed for the book on the metacognition.
Great.
And it's funny because I talked to them about this, and I'm not going to give away the spoiler on this, but they're also futurists, in case that wasn't obvious. And they're actually really well respected and very good futurists. They're, similar to our friend, but they've got 25 years less experience. I mean,
I gotcha.
They're younger than I am by a little bit, but their mother was also a futurist, and so it was an inherited business. So while their age might be 40ish, and you kind of like,
they've been in it.
They've been in it for a really, really long time, and so it's interesting. And like what I even in our pre-interview today, like that, I think that's why I jumped on this topic for tonight, because like it, this is all they do is like talk about the future. I mean, you know what he does, like, right? Like, I mean, it's like you think about the future.
Here's where everything's going based on the current information. Yeah.
And here's what I found out today their bias is. And this is actually kind of interesting to me, but their bias is that they think that multidisciplinary thinking is like sort of the way around this, like the way through it, I should say. And they're not wrong in a sense, but the fact of the matter is that their bias is that they don't see people who don't intrinsically be cross-disciplinary, because that's how futurists function.
Yeah,
they're
they
like
need to
sort
look
of
at everything.
ninjas at cross-disciplinary, right?
Yeah.
Like, but that's why they're futurists, because they were born that way and they fucking honed the shit out of it, right? Like, and that is different than like 99.99999% of the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Who does not do that. And I'm talking even smart people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not even talking about dumb regular people. I'm talking about like really bright people. You don't think like this naturally as a human. It's just not a thing. Like, we don't have that kind of clarity of future.
Yeah.
People get stuck in their own biases, and like, it's fascinating talking to them about this, because they're like, the way through an artificial intelligence world is having a really cross-disciplinary approach to life, because then you'll know how to get the right answers that you're looking for. And I was arguing that AI might be the death of multidisciplinary thinking, because I don't have to actually understand the nuance of everything that I want to do. I just
AI will,
I just want to make this elephant pink. Like, I don't have to like know about genetics or fucking, like recessive genes, and like, I don't know how to know, I don't need to worry about any of that.
Yeah.
And I don't even have to know somebody who knows the answer. Like right now, did you see that AI that failed for trying to kill the world, like destroy humanity? Yeah. So the AI was built to destroy humanity. That was the stated objective, was destroy humanity, and it failed. People on Twitter were like, fuck off, like, nope. But it failed. And I said, I'm glad it failed. But at the same time, like, if I really wanted to destroy humanity, think of the multidisciplinary, like, marshaling I would have to do to pull that off. Like, I'd have to like be a fucking straight up baller at like making friends in high places. Like, it would take a crazy amount of effort. And so like, if you pulled it off, you kind of deserve it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're like, fuck, this was tough. But if you're just like cracking a beer playing Xbox and you're like, hey, Siri, make me an AI that destroys humanity. Like, then no, you shouldn't deserve to get
able to do that. Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, no, that should definitely not be something you get.
Yeah. So, well, anyway, man. Thanks for playing around. We'll
All right, man.
Till
We'll
next
catch
time.
up soon.
Indeed.
Be subversive, irreverent.
Health is wealth, but you knew that.
Everybody knows that.
But so is following us on social media at Irreverent Health. And check out our website for more exclusive content at irreverenthealth.com.
Oh, I like this.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Irreverent Health.